Welcome to BMZ-UNEVOC Dialogue Forum. My name is Ingrid Portenkirchner. I have the pleasure and big honor to be your moderator today. I work for the Donor Committee of Dual Vocational Education and Training. And before we start, let me give you some organizational and technical hints. First, for all of you who are here in the room. If you want to know more about our speakers or panelists, you can check out the bios and the profiles on the website. On your name badge, you'll find some QR codes that lead you directly to the website. This event is recorded and will be published. So if you do not want to appear on the video, please take a seat in the last row and you will not appear. The emergency exits here, and I hope we will not need them, but all the emergency exits are on this window side. So in case of an emergency, please do not leave the room. On this side, you use those, yeah? Do not enter the lobby anymore, and then you go around the building and the assembly point is in front of the main entrance. What else? Documentation of this event today. You will receive in the next few weeks, when the documentation is ready, the recordings and all the presentations. So today you just have take your notes, enjoy, relax, and and think and discuss with us. And this is a very good moment now for turning off your mobile phones. For those of you joining us online, please use the chat box for your comments and questions and remarks. We have some colleagues, thank you for monitoring the chat. And we will try to include some of the questions from the chat in our discussions here in the room as well. And this is only for our virtual participants. We will have a break during the event. Around 3:30, we will, here in Bonn, break up and have some technical discussions. This will not be broadcast, so for you joining online, this means that you have a break. Until 4:45, you can check your emails, do some meetings, whatever you think is necessary, and please come again then at 4:45. Good. What is on the agenda for today? I'm sure you have found it at your seat, and let's have a short look at it together. You will see that we have 4.5 hours that are quite intense, but also hopefully very inspiring. And we will start with some welcome remarks by our hosts from BMZ and a keynote presentation from our hosts from UNESCO. After this, we will get to know 2 papers, a discussion paper and a vision paper that are part of a series of studies commissioned by the BMZ on skills for just transition to a green future. And I'm happy to see that the print versions are already, you have taken some. And we will also hear some first experiences trying to implement what it means. And this will be followed by a top-level panel discussion here on thinking of how TVET systems have to align themselves for a green future. At 2:45, if our schedule works, and I hope it does work, we will be then introduced to 3 sectoral studies and listen also to not only the studies, but also to some implementation experiences from Kenya and Mongolia. And then, after a short break, it's your turn. You will have the opportunity to discuss with the colleagues that are here, with experts on different topics in some technical discussion groups. This will be the moment for our virtual audience to have the break. And after those technical discussions, we will meet again around 4:45, and then we will listen to the key messages from these discussions, hear some closing remarks, and close the event. And then we will experience something very unique today. We will have a band here. You can see that the musicians already prepared, because we want you to exchange in a more informal setting and deepen the discussion. So there's plenty of time to talk to experts and colleagues. The band, which is really nice, is unique because it just assembled and came together for this single event. So we are very much looking forward to this musical journey with the French Swing Jazz World Quartet. And for those of you who have registered, have time and want to chat even more, we can do so over dinner. There is a dinner, and GIZ was so kind to reserve the table in a restaurant that is very close by, and this starts at 6:30 p.m. So you can see, first we have a lot of food for thought, and then we have some food for the stomach as well, and time for discussion, exchange, and to be a little bit more interactive. And it looks that like we have an interesting community here. I don't know if you have already met a lot of people you already have seen before, but I want to invite you to a short exercise. I'm sure that I'm not the only person in this room who is curious who else is joining today and who else is in the room. So let's do it's very short, a short exercise. And it's also good not only to get to know each other, but it's also good after the lunch. So it goes like this. I will ask you, it's only 2 questions, and give you different options of answers. And you, if you feel like, okay, this option fits for me, you just stand up. Easy. Okay, so it's called here icebreaker. So let's give it a try with the first question. And the question is, which level do you represent? Are you a policymaker? Are you an implementer? Do you come from the private sector? Or do you represent the civil society? This is not here, but we will do it. We are spontaneous here. Okay? So let's see. If you are in the field of policy making, please stand up now. Interesting. Thank you. Have a look around. Did you know each other before? So maybe, thank you. Where are the implementers? Please stand up now. Yeah, this group is bigger. Great, thank you so much. Now I'm curious, who comes from the private sector? Yeah. Welcome. And anybody from civil society, others? Great. Research, NGOs. So at least you have some ideas, thank you. Maybe whom to talk with and whom you have something in common with. Good, and since it worked that well, we try with a second one. The second question is, where is the regional focus of your current work? Yeah? Is it Africa, Asia, Americas, Europe, or maybe some of you say, no, I'm working on a global level, or other, so whatever that is. Okay, good. Africa. Okay, have a look around. Who else is here working in the same region with you? Thank you. You can sit down. Asia. Thank you and welcome. Americas. Yeah. Did you know each other? We do. You do. Okay. Europe. Thank you. Great. And global, other. Wow. Okay. Is somebody saying, okay, I'm from other? What is other? This will be interesting. So be sure you will have a lot of people who want to talk to you during the break. Thank you. Good. So this was refreshing, hopefully. And then with this, we can start. And you have already maybe identified some people you want to talk to during this event. And now please join me in welcoming one of our hosts, Dr. Tanja Rödiger-Vorwerk, Deputy Director General, Global Health and Equality of Opportunity at the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ. Thank you for being with us. And you will give us open the event with some welcoming remarks and introduce us to the position of the German Development Corporation on greening skills. Thank you, and a warm applause. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, and welcome to this really interesting afternoon. My name is Tanja Vorwerk, and I really appreciate that Mr. Chakroun is with us on the screen. We hope to have you here, but of course we know that there are so many travel obligations that we understand you cannot be on the site today with us. But anyway, I'm looking forward to your speech. Mr. Hübler, so you are all energized, your batteries have been charged with this exercise you just did, so we can go ahead with some insights. Together with our long-standing partner UNESCO-UNEVOC, so I'm very pleased to welcome you to this dialogue forum today, and we want to discuss a topic that is very vital for us, just transition. The role of TVET and higher education in transforming our economy is a sustainable and social ecological way. So making this transition to a climate-friendly economy, and I'm happy to be here today because in my working life experience, I was at many sites responsible for this issue, and I'm happy that this is a really growing movement and working experience. So making this transition to a climate-friendly economy in the face of rising energy demand, it's a challenge for everyone, also for us here in Germany. We all know this. And we are currently experiencing ourselves how a lack of skilled workers slows down urgent needed transformation processes. So this is the same in our partner countries. They are facing similar challenges, and we are working together with them to make their economies innovative and sustainable and to support them in adapting to climate change. And that is why we in the BMZ have made just transition as a priority of our work. And TVET is a central pillar in this. You need qualified workers for the transition. Without them, no electric car will be maintained, no solar power system will be installed, and no hydropower plant will be operated. We need qualified workers at all levels, and we must provide them with up-to-date skills and knowledge, and this requires far-reaching changes in training and employment, including, and very specific, including the training of teachers. We need good teachers for quality vocational training and education. And in cooperation with our partner countries, we therefore work on the following aspects. First of all, we promote TVET as a prerequisite for green jobs and as a driver for ecological transformation. And for this, we need to align vocational training and employment promotion more strongly with our environmental and climate goals. And by 2050, 2/3 of the world's population are expected to live in cities. Just transition also means with this climate-friendly and livable cities. And this includes at least public transport, sustainable public transport, energy-efficient housing, a resource-conserving circular economy, and safe water supply. And again, this is only possible if there is an adequate skilled workforce. Today we will talk about these sectors in more depth. And as a transition is only socially just if we leave no one behind in the process, and women are still underrepresented in many sectors. For example, in the renewable energies or sustainable constructions, but also in digital professions. And in line with our feminist development policy, we support strongly women in advocating and asserting their rights, representations, and resources in and through vocational training and education. And if we think about that, half of the people in Africa are under 20 years of age, and worldwide there are 1.8 billion people between the ages of 10 and 24. And they are the largest generation of youth in history. And we want them to be a part of this just transition to a green economy. They need training and jobs in green sectors to make this transition happen. And at the BMZ, we advance climate and development partnerships, which also include skills development. For example, in South Africa and Senegal, we will hear about this today, something more. So we rely on this multilateral cooperation, for example, with the UN, the EU, and the G7. And during the German G7 presidency last year, we pushed for a clear commitment by the G7 to strengthen green jobs and skills. And I'm happy that my teams have been so strong in this negotiation that we have it in the papers now. We are pleased that the G7 have adopted the goal of increasing the share of their ODA for green skills and jobs by 2025. And within this framework of the multilateral just energy transition partnerships, the BMZ also supports projects in South Africa and other partner countries that enable young people to gain access to training and employment in low carbon sectors. And all these examples show that we are very committed to promoting green skills. But for this, we need you. We need your expertise, we need your ideas, and we need your efforts. So we must work together to make the just transition to reality for some people. And we have different communities here today, and this shows that we have to work together. So let us today therefore explore some of these questions. What do we need to advance green skills for a just transition? And I'm looking forward to the exchange and a successful afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you very much for opening the event. And now let's hear about UNESCO's international perspective on transforming TVET to deliver green skills. We're pleased to have Mr. Borhin Chakroun. He is Director, Policy of Lifelong Learning Systems Division at UNESCO headquarters. We would love to have him here, but unfortunately he had to travel on very short notice yesterday to New York, but he did not want to miss the opportunity to be with us, and that's why he's connected, and we welcome you live on screen. Thank you for being with us. Good morning for you, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon, and guten Morgen. Good morning to all colleagues, Deputy Director General, Head of UNESCO-UNEVOC, esteemed colleagues and participants in the room, but also online. Warm greetings and thank you for joining this very important event. First, let me start by thanking the government of Germany, BMZ, for the support giving to UNESCO-UNEVOC International Center and UNESCO-UNEVOC Network in all endeavors since now many years. And your contribution and support are really appreciated by all UNESCO's leadership and our teams. I would like to share with you some of the perspective that we have regarding the work on greening skills and green economy, a just transition today. And if the PowerPoint will be projected, I would like to start with I have prepared a presentation around 3 areas. The first one is related to the transitions and the challenges and the broad framework that we have to take into consideration. The second will be about what are the bottlenecks and what are the problems that we face in this context. And the third will be related to the action of UNESCO and UNESCO-UNEVOC in this context. So this will be my focus today. And of course, my colleagues, and during the day, there will be different sessions and different moments for engagement. If I can see the screen, that would be great. Otherwise, I can manage, no problem. So let me start by the first point that I wanted to highlight is about those multiple transitions that we need to take into account in looking at the green economy and the green and the just transition toward green economies. The first aspect that I wanted to highlight is the interdependence of these factors. And I don't see the slide is moving. So if you can move to the next slide, yes, please. So I think the first point I wanted to highlight is the interdependence of the different aspects: the economic recovery, technological change, informality, demographic transition, societal and political issues, and the sustainable development path. Where, of course, climate change are important. The question is that education has to interface with those multiple forms and different levels, but also that education and training, and the Deputy Director was just mentioning the importance of anticipating regarding the change and the importance of responding to the skills demand. So these are aspects that we would need to take into consideration when looking at the green economy. If we can move to the next slide. Deputy Director also mentioned the skill shortages. In reality, we have job shortages in some economies, and I'm giving here the example of US, with around 20% of the jobs that are offered around the sustainable development and issues related to durable goods and manufacturing. There is a lack of labor. There are lack of laborers in other part of the economy. So labor shortages is one of the challenge in some of the economies, particularly European economy, North America, but also countries like Japan and Korea. But when we move to the next slide, you'll see that unemployment rate remains very high in many economies. In the Arab states, it's around 9%. When we take youth unemployment is sometimes double, if not the triple of the average unemployment rate. So we have, I would say, shortages of labor in some economies, in some sectors, but we have also an unemployment rate that is very high in some of the economies. And in some cases, the supply of skilled workers is rather lacking. So high level of unemployment, but with low skills capacities. If we move to the next slides, we also see those emerging technologies that are affecting our economies, AI, space tech, Internet of Things, always related to the Industry 4.0, as we tend to mention, are impacting all economies at different levels in different ways, but they are impacting the economies. But what is important to note, next slides, is that the informal economy is there and is not shrinking. And that means that in many cases, particularly in developing economies, around 60% of the jobs are still in informal economy. And that's the capacity to regulate, to act, to develop skills, to engage with that type of economy is always very difficult because of the informality aspect of it. But it's part of the economy, and we need to take this into account. When we speak about economies, I think we need to speak about the diversity of economy, from informal to formal, from small enterprises to medium, to large companies, multinational. So when we speak about economies, we need to be also clear that we are speaking about very diverse landscape. If we move to the next slide, and it's very important to note also that to invest in green economy, we need growth. But the growth is uneven across different economies. The global growth is not growing, and in 2024, we are expecting around 3% of growth. Is diverse. The North America, again, Europe is rather sluggish type of growth, but in emerging economies, it is higher. But we need more growth, inclusive growth, growth that is sustainable and that is green, to create more jobs and create more demand for skills. Next slide, please. And just I think it's very important to keep in mind also, in relation with the green, there is also the digital divide. We know that technology is penetrating all of our economies, but the fact that we have very large digital divide within economies and across economies will also impact the way we engage in economic development, and the way technology and green technology digital technology and green technology will affect the way the skills demand and the jobs are shaped. So if we move to the next slides, one of the factors that is very important is also demography. And we have economies that are shrinking in terms of population, and others which are growing very fast. And it's very important, the dynamic of the demographies, both in terms of the demand for skills and also the needs for upgrading, upskilling, reskilling. If we move to the next slide, you can see that in some economies, the effort will be about aged workers, even elder workers, and their demand for skills. But in other economies, it will be about youth transiting to the labor market, and who will need skills to enter the labor market. So the dynamics are quite different. And I finish with this first part of regarding the challenge that we can see that will mean that we will need a different type of responses. And I think it's very important when we are looking at the skills demand, is that one size fits all doesn't work. Second, that we will need to adjust to different demands. And third, which I think is very important, the social justice has to be at the center of our attention and the greening of the economy. And I think a just transition is the right word that the Deputy Director General mentioned earlier in her presentation. So if we can move further in the presentation, and one of the aspects that I wanted to highlight is what are the major transitions that affect the supply and demand for green skills. I already mentioned some of them, but I wanted to go deeper into the analysis. First of all, I think we have to frame the discussion in paradigms. And just to say that the spectrum of climate perspective has been swinging between climate skeptic people and who think that there is no challenge, or climate fatalists who think that the sky will fall on humanity tomorrow morning. And of course, the question is how we are shaping our perspective on the green economy and within which paradigm. And I think if we move to the next slides regarding SDGs, I think we need to place the paradigm of greening in the paradigm of sustainable development, in particular when we speak about education and training in SDG 4, but not only it's about SDG 8 on inclusive and decent work and other SDGs, but it's also about human rights. It's the right to education, it's the right to lifelong learning that is important. And of course, is the agreement and our commitment to leave no one behind that is important in this context. It's very important that we take into consideration these dimensions when we are speaking about the paradigms within which the economic and green economy has to be looked at. Next slide. I already mentioned the issue of demography, so I'll go fast. It's very important that we take into account the demographic challenge when we are speaking about the transition. It's one determining factor that will shape any strategy for skills development. If we move to the next slide, but if I can move to the transition too, I mentioned about the technology and labor market. I would like to focus on issues related to the advanced technology for clean technologies and that requires new skills for success in the labor market in the right part of the slide on transition number 2. I think the question and when reading about the investment in green economy, we see that and we have seen many colleagues from Africa that the investment in energy, for example, in green energy, is the lowest in Africa when you take the global indicator. So it's very important that we invest in those technology and we see where the resources will come from in investing in those technologies. The third transition that I wanted to mention is, and the Deputy Director General alluded to that, is how we move from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And the aim to move from a target which is less use of fossil fuels to more use of renewable energy. We know that the cycle is not linear, that many economies are still reluctant to move from fossil to renewable energy. And that will determine also the creation of jobs, the demand for skills, and the pace for which there will be a demand for skills. But we have good news, and I move to the next slide, if you don't mind, on transition for the demand for green skills. And looking at the most recent data coming from LinkedIn, the good news is that there is an increasing share of green talent in the workforce. That the share of job postings, when we refer to LinkedIn, of course, is increasing in terms of the requirement for at least one green skills. So there is a demand for green skills. Also that the median growth in LinkedIn job posting is rather increasing, requiring at least one green skills is also increasing. So there is a demand from the labor market for green skills, and that's good news because this will require more jobs and will create more jobs, will create more demand for skills. But if we move to the next slide, we see that there are different dimensions that we would need to take into account. For example, the type of jobs that we are speaking about, jobs in and the ratio of US oil gas jobs to renewable environment has increased by from 5 to 1 to 2 to 1. So we have an increase in the demand. The share of green talent has been also increasing. The number of jobs in renewable and environmental in United States have increased by 237%. So the growth is very important, and although this will not necessarily be the case in all economies, but as some of the economies are in a way front runners, maybe those are indicators that there will be a demand for green skills. If we move to the next slide, please. I have also, together with colleagues, we looked at some of other data coming from other sources of information. For example, the EDICO group data published in 2021. We see that there is also an increasing demand and opportunities for creation of jobs, but that if we don't invest in skills, we may lose millions of jobs worldwide. So the urgency of investment in green skills is today, and we cannot wait until there is a more we cannot expect that there will be creation of jobs if we don't invest in skills. And this is very clear message that is coming from this research. It's also coming from work we have done, and I'm not referring to it here, at UNESCO headquarters. We looked at the training funds, and we have seen that there is $1 billion that are invested in upskilling and reskilling that has to be also shifted toward green skills and green economies. I'm cautious about the time, so I would like to move to the next step and the next slide.
Mr.
Looking at,
yeah.
Yes.
I'm very sorry to interrupt you. We agreed, and I will announce when time is up. So if you could come to a closing remark, would be kind.
Maybe if I can move to the way forward and what UNESCO is doing in this context. So that slide, the way forward, please. Is that there?
Yes, we can see one that says the way forward and UNESCO's role.
Thank you. So I would like to focus now on a few aspects that seems to me important. If we move to the next slide, I think when we are speaking about greening skills, we need to take lifelong learning perspective. And that means that we cannot expect the investment in skills to happen only at one time. We need to take the lifelong learning perspective, and we start preparing individuals for green skills and sustainable development from early learning, from early child education, covering, of course, primary and secondary, tertiary education, vocational training, also in upskilling and reskilling. But it's very important also the elder persons. They have also to develop skills to engage in a greening society, and it's very important that we take a broader perspective in this case. This is what, if I move to the next slide, this is what comes in the Secretary General message toward the transformation of education. We need to transform education, transform technical and vocational education to meet those demands for new economies and new societies. And that's what UNESCO, if I move to the next slide, that's what UNESCO strategy for Tibet is covering. We think that the green economy and the green society has to cover the demand from three parts: individuals and individual learning pathways, economies, and also societal skills. Some of them are related to citizenship, participation in societies. But some of them are, of course, related to specific jobs and specific demand. But it's very important that we take the lifelong learning and accompany people in their learning path. And for that, if I move to the next slide, we have developed a partnership as part of the Transforming Education Summit. We are calling it UNESCO Greening Education Partnership, that covers four dimensions: greening institutions, greening learning and learning pathways, greening teacher and teacher capacities, and Deputy Director General mentioned that, and greening economies. That means link with the labor market, link with the communities. And these are four components that are critical for greening of the economies. If I can move to the last slide, which is about UNEVOC work in this context, and my colleagues will be, of course, covering this in their presentation and in the discussion. We have quite important initiative around greening of economy. Let me thank the colleagues in the government of Germany and BMBF for the support and BUILD project, which is looking at the new qualifications and new demand for green jobs and green skills. We have also the leadership program that is developing a new leadership for technical and vocational education and training that will advance and will act to transform Tibet toward greening Tibet. We need capacity building, and it's very important that we invest in it. And we have a large number of other resources that are important to consider. Just to mention one of them is the Greening Tibet Institution, which is a tool that is used by many UNEVOC centers to transform their campus into greening campus. So colleagues, it was a pleasure to join you today online. I missed the opportunity to be in the room, but I thank the organizers, my colleagues at UNEVOC, for allowing me to join online. And I will take our discussion today to the debate here in the SDG Summit and in the high-level panel on teaching profession that I'm representing Director General today, this morning. And part of it is about how teachers can be actor for the transformation of education and training, and obviously actor for the transformation of TVET into a greening TVET. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Mr. Chakroun, for the insights, the data, the extremely rich slides, and I'm sure that there is a lot of information still inside that we will explore. I'm not sure if you could feel it. I saw a lot of interest here in the room. Thanks to you, and all the best. Bye-bye, and next time you will be with us. Thank you. Good. And now we move on to our next block, having a look at our schedule. We start the technical sessions. This was just the opening now, and we want to outline a vision for TVET to increase its contribution to a just transition. So we want to identify the barriers, talk about the challenges, and see where are areas for improvement. And for this, we will start with 2 papers out of the series of 5 studies commissioned by the BMZ on skills for a just transition to a green future. The discussion paper is the starting point for this series, and probably you have already seen it here. And there you will find theses and recommendations for the design of interventions. The good thing is you don't have to read it now. You have the author here, and I want to ask Margarita Langthaler. She is Research Associate from the Austrian Foundation for Development Research, and she will present the key messages of this paper. And I also want to welcome Kristen Freiman from South Africa, our next speaker. But Kristen, maybe you can already open your camera. Welcome. Thank you for being with us, because you will do the practicality check of this paper. And now the floor is yours. Welcome, Margarita.
Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome. And I would start with thanking the organizers for inviting me here to this event. Can you hear me well? I have the impression. Okay. So it is my pleasure here to present the discussion paper in the first one in the series of 5 papers. I'm a researcher with the Austrian Foundation for Development Research, and I had the pleasure and the honor to be part of the group of experts who wrote this paper, which was actually directed by FACT, consulting agency, and I'm very happy that some of my co-authors are also here in the room, and I hope that they will be able then to also join into the discussion. So as already mentioned, the paper is the first one in a series of 5 studies on skills for a just transition to a green future. And there are 2 more political papers, guiding documents for TVET at policy level. The first one is the discussion paper I'm going to present, and the second one is the vision paper, which my colleague Lena Krychewski will be presenting in a couple of minutes. And then there are 3 sector studies, guiding documents for practitioners in selected subsectors, and these are the sustainable transport and mobility, sustainable construction, and renewable energies. So in the first paper, in the discussion paper, we actually highlighted 7 theses, and I'm going to give you a short overview of these theses. The first one says that green agendas and TVET policies have to be aligned to each other. The second one says that the private sector needs incentives, sanctions, and support to develop demand for green skills. The third one stresses the importance of integrating the informal economy. The fourth one speaks about aligning TVET systems with social protection systems. And the fifth one speaks about TVET and education for sustainable development. The sixth stresses the importance of labor market forecasting, and the seventh and final speaks about existing occupational profiles and new ones that have to be developed. So for the sake of time, I'm going to present only 3 theses out of these 7 ones, and other topics will be covered by my colleagues who will speak after me. So the first one is, and here is the original wording, as a successful just transition requires a coherent alignment of green agendas and skills development policies. So the underlying observation to this first thesis is that actually in many countries, both in the global north and in the global south, there are green agendas, sustainability agendas, and TVET agendas, but mostly the two of them are not aligned to each other, but kind of run in parallel. So this is actually a prerequisite for successful green skills development, to have a stronger alignment between these two policy areas. We need a systematic orientation of educational systems and TVET systems towards sustainability. We need sustainability to be incorporated in all policy areas, including TVET, and we need a clear ownership and steering role from the government, and the strengthening of governance and coordination mechanisms. So the next thesis I would like to present is thesis 4, which says that TVET is crucial to prepare the labor force for a just transition, but TVET systems need to be strengthened and aligned to comprehensive social protection measures. So as we've heard before, the transition to a green economy will of course cause a lot of changes in the global labor market. But these changes will not be evenly distributed, but some of them will also be disruptive, and these disruptions will be unevenly distributed across the globe. And there is expectations that the global south will be hit harder, and especially the group of unskilled or low-skilled workers will be most at risk of layoffs and of losing their jobs. So TVET, of course, is crucial to prepare the labor force for these changes and disruptions to be expected. But TVET alone cannot be responsible for preparing the labor force. It has to be combined and aligned with active labor market policies and social protection measures. And TVET also needs to be thought of in a broader sense. It has to address initial training as well as re- and upskilling. We've just heard that we have to think about the education and TVET in a lifelong perspective. TVET has to transmit solid occupational and transferable core skills. It's not enough to just prepare the workers for a single and narrowly defined jobs, but they have to have solid occupational and transferable skills. TVET has to react flexibly to changing skill requirements, and of course, we have to always think about include women and marginalized people in TVET systems in order to leave no one behind. So the last thesis I would like to talk about now is thesis 5, which says that just transitions require holistic TVET reforms in line with education for sustainable development to ensure relevance, attractiveness, and inclusivity. So the underlying observation to this thesis is that actually in many countries of the global south, TVET systems are in themselves too weak and too fragmented to assume this role of training a strong labor force for the green future. So what TVET systems mostly need are holistic reforms that include a couple of elements. First of all, they need close interlinkage with other forms of education to ensure mutual permeability. Actually, in many countries, it's the case now that TVET systems have a rather low social reputation. They are considered second best or even the last resort for those who have not made it into general academic education. And this needs to change. TVET systems have to become an attractive and holistic educational pathway in their own right. TVET systems need to be aligned with sustainability and digitalization policies. Of course, TVET personnel, teachers, trainers need to be trained appropriately and properly. They also need to act as role models and change agents, and this has to be prepared, of course. Then education for sustainable development needs to be mainstreamed into TVET systems because, as many of you might know, until now the focus of education for development, for sustainable development has been the general education system, and the TVET systems have been rather marginalized, and this should change. And what we also need is a multi-level governance approach to allow for the integration of local stakeholders. And this is particularly dear to myself. We need more respect, more acknowledgement, and integration of local knowledge to ensure that TVET is also of local relevance and is locally contextualized. So here, this is just to show you the 7 theses in their original wording. You find them, of course, also in the paper, which is on the table over there. And I'll stop here, and I'm looking forward to the contributions of my colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margarita. Stay with us. Thank you so much. And please stay with us, because even if we are lacking a little bit behind, we hope we have 1 or 2 minutes for questions to the studies afterwards. Good. Thanks a lot. Extremely interesting. Now, this discussion paper has inspired our next input. The discussion paper let's put it the other way around. Welcome, Kirsten from South Africa. Kirsten is the head of a project that's called Career Path Development for Employment. And this project has tried to put into practice some of the recommendations of the paper. So this is kind of a practicality check. Let's see how it works. Kirsten, the floor is yours. We are very curious to see how you can link your project to the paper. Welcome with us.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon from South Africa. I hope you can hear me well. I'm very pleased to contribute today with an example from South Africa. How do we support TVET in the just transition here in South Africa? Next slide, please. So just a very brief background on what is South Africa facing when we talk about just transition. What does it actually mean? So we need to take in consideration that South Africa actually is facing 2 major challenges when we talk about that transition. One is that South Africa is facing an economic recession, and we see dramatic high unemployment rates, especially amongst youth and especially amongst female. So talking about youth, here we see unemployment rates of 40 to 60%. Yeah. At the same time, the country is facing an energy crisis and trying to transition to a green economy. So the energy crisis means that we have a shortfall of 6 gigawatt in the system, meaning an underproduction of electricity of around about 10%. Yeah, I hear an echo. The sound is a bit difficult. Maybe the microphone needs to be switched off or something. Yeah, oh, much better. So I was talking about the energy crisis. So this shortfall of energy production leads to what we call load shedding here, meaning that electricity is switched off several times, actually almost daily now. We saw load shedding on 200 days in 2022, and it's actually increasing. So it's making life very hard for South Africans. And when we look at the electricity mix of South Africa, we can see that 80% of electricity comes from fossil fuels, mainly coal, yeah, and renewables represent only 7%. So the idea to exit coal production and increase the part of renewables supports also closing the gap of these 10%, because to install renewable energies in the form of wind and solar PV is a quite, yeah, it's not an easy way because it will take quite a lot of time, but it is a way to close that gap as quickly as possible. And what we can see already is that the expansion of the renewables are already picking up. Yeah, I've just selected 2 statistics here that you can see without going into details. In the sake of time, you can see that the solar PV market is already responding to the increased demand. Next slide, please. So that change of the electricity supply will have effects on the labor market, obviously. So when we are talking about these 2 complex challenges, how can a just transition actually be supported? And in 2021, a just energy transition partnership was entered between Germany, France, Great Britain, USA, the European Union, together with South Africa, to support a just and inclusive transition. And in that transition, TVET and skills development play a central role, yeah, in the just part of the transition, as it was highlighted by previous speakers already. So, but what we say is that the support to TVET should be embedded within a holistic approach so that we can support sustainable employment effects and to respond to the interlinked challenges I was just outlining. So what we will see are significant impacts for employment and emerging demands in the job market, and those must be considered. And employment opportunities should be unlocked by supporting conducive framework conditions and innovation, adjusting the TVET delivery system on relevant sectors and skills in demand, stimulating the demand side to unlock employment opportunities, and to bring both sides together, demand side and supply side, by matching in the labor market. And that is what we call the integrated approach to employment promotion. Next slide, please. So that approach is actually the underlying approach of our project Career Path Development for Employment, which is being implemented by GIZ and financed by the German and the Swiss governments. So what we try to support is skills development and employment promotion in the context for a just transition. And the aim is to improve employment prospects of young South Africans, but also of those communities that are affected by the structural changes in the areas, for example, the coal areas in the Mpumalanga region here in South Africa. Next slide, please. So as it was mentioned, when the discussion paper, The Skills for a Just Transition to a Green Future, was published, our team reflected on the theses, and we did a reality check. How do these theses actually correspond to the context here in South Africa? And we formulated a South African perspective, and we explored what are the implications of the TVET system in creating a workforce that will be able to address not only the labor market needs for green economy, but also the socio-economic dimensions of this transformation process. So CPD4E is one example where we illustrate how do we support in that regard. And the paper was presented by us at an international research conference here in Johannesburg in May this year. Next slide, please. So what we basically did is we reflected how do these theses fit together with the integrated approach, which I just introduced. And yeah, what we can say is that they do match, they fit together and give us a good foundation of how can we meaningfully support employment promotion and a just transition at the same time. And now I would like to come to some examples. How do we do that? Next slide, please. And I have
sorry for interrupting. 1 more minute. Thank you.
Yes, it's my last slide. So, so I have picked 4 examples, speaking to the 4 dimensions of the approach we are working with. One example, we work with ILO in conducting labor market analysis and forecasting, research and social dialogue to develop tailor-made reskilling programs for affected workers and mining communities. Another example where we support the supply side, the TVET system. We train TVET lecturers on renewable energy technologies. We support the greening of curricula, the development of solar technician qualification and solar PV learning programs. Another example where we partner with the National Business Initiative here in South Africa. We support small, micro and medium-sized companies and entrepreneurs in just transition relevant sectors to unlock income opportunities while we support hubs located at TVET colleges close to industrial zones to support the development of an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And my last example, here we partner with the Institute of Energy Professionals Africa to train unemployed youth as energy performance practitioners. And through a very practical approach, mentored working on real-life assignments, and the combination with work placements, the learners acquire skills that are in very high demand in the labor market and which are very relevant to for a decarbonized economy. Those are a few examples of what we are doing here. And with that, I would like to close and give back to Bonn.
Thank you, Kirsten. I hope you have heard this was your applause. Thanks a lot for those insights. There are always so many details and interesting aspects, but thanks for linking the study and the paper and the project. Good. And there's one more paper to get to know what TVET can and must do in a just transition to a green economy. This is the title of the next paper. It's the vision paper 2030, also commissioned by BMZ. And here we have the author already on stage. Thank you, Dr. Lena Kiszewski-Wegener. She's consultant at the Institute for Innovation and Technology, also author, and the floor is yours. Thank you for outlining the key messages of this paper.
Thank you very much. Is it on? Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here. And my task is to present to you the Vision 2030, which was commissioned by GIZ on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Development Corporation to FACT Consult and the Institute for Innovation and Technology. So that's what I will focus on. Over the years, German development actors, together with their partners, have developed many tools and approaches to enhance the contribution of TVET to economic and social development. And they have promoted especially, or they are still promoting especially, the cooperative model of TVET, which combines school-based and work-based learning. So this has been done with some success in a range of countries. But today there is also a growing sense that TVET cooperation needs to be critically reflected and to some extent reoriented also in order to better support partner countries to face such challenges as climate change and the loss of biodiversity, and to meet the challenges Bohin Shakrun has just depicted so well for us a moment ago. So we are all aware of the urgency to act, and that's why the vision is focused on what can we do now and in the next 6 years. And the question which was leading our work was how should Germany position itself in the field of TVET cooperation to foster a just transition to a green future in partner countries. So at the core of the vision, there is a vision of transformative TVET, which we related on the one hand to an analysis of employment trends and qualification requirements in key sectors, and on the other hand to experiences and lessons learned from existing projects and approaches. So bringing all this together, we propose 4 perspectives to enrich and reconceptualize German TVET cooperation. The vision paper is a contribution to a discourse which is ongoing and which we think is still at a quite early stage. So we should remind ourselves that this discourse will go on and that our understanding of what is needed to achieve a just transition to a green future is still progressing. And in order to have an impact, the vision will have to be shared and further developed and discussed with policymakers and practitioners here in Germany, but of course also in the global south. So before addressing these 4 perspectives in more details, we should have a quick look at where we stand now and what transformative TVET is about. So looking at the wider context first, we can see that developing and emerging countries are confronted with a dilemma. On the one hand, they need to improve living conditions of their populations and to support economic development, while on the other hand, climate change and environmental degradation call for reduced energy consumption and saving of natural resources. So what we call clean technologies are holding some potential for economic growth and new jobs that will be less harmful for the environment, but at the same time, shifting the economy towards these technologies destroys jobs and creates also risks for populations who are working in carbon-intensive sectors. So, for instance, when public transports are extended, taxi drivers risk losing their jobs. And whether individuals or whole communities are winners or losers of this change process has very much to do with how well these peoples are equipped with the skills and competences to engage in the transition process. So for now, formal TVET systems all over the world tend to resemble European models, which have developed in the wake of industrialization and are thus oriented towards the values and needs of economic growth model, which is all but sustainable. Whereas on the other hand, traditional forms of vocational education and training, such as apprenticeship systems in the informal sector, for instance, provide skills to a significant number of people, but they suffer from low prestige, from quality issues, a lack of recognition, and also a disconnection with more knowledge and technology-intensive sectors. So to foster a just transition, TVET must respond to skills demands in emerging sectors and occupations, but also support individuals and communities to become agents of change and invent new forms of work and value creation where declining industries threaten their jobs and income sources. This means to focus not only on technical skills, but also on transversal skills, including the ability to question the status quo and to team up with others to bring about change in established structures. So this is what transformative TVET could contribute to, and taking a more holistic understanding also of human activity as a starting point, fostering cooperation not only with enterprises, which is really vital and very important, but also to foster cooperation with local and regional bodies, with civil society, the informal sector, and communities. So now what does this mean all for TVET cooperation? The vision paper develops 4 complementary perspectives on what German development cooperation actors could do more or could do differently. A first perspective is about integrating green aspects in TVET reforms. So TVET policies need to be coordinated with other policies, as we heard already in the discussion paper. And this should be a key aspect in approaches that support system reforms. So green transition and social inclusion are cross-cutting issues of highest importance. And this can mean, for instance, among others, that TVET should impart a kind of green literacy to all learners. Green literacy is not only about a cognitive understanding of transformation, but also a lived experience of it in TVET institutions that are truly green and socially inclusive, which is linked to what Bohin Chakrun said a moment ago also. A second perspective is that TVET should foster the shift to new technologies and modes of production, for instance, in the field of renewable energy, organic farming, or green building, to name just a few. And this requires thinking in terms of workplaces and value chains, asking not only what skills to develop, but also what conditions must be in place for people to actually be able to use their skills. So an interesting approach we develop a little bit in the vision paper is that of green missions to gather actors from different spheres around a common objectives, like we had the mission to go to the moon, and we can translate this approach also to other missions, like to establish a green energy sector or hydrogen branch, for instance, in a specific country or region. A third perspective is about engaging with the informal sector or the informal economy, which is also a key aspect to achieve a just transition, as we heard. So many activities in the informal economy are directly linked to processing of natural resources, and accordingly, a lot of people in this area are particularly affected by climate change and environmental degradation. At the same time, the social practices, which are geared heavily towards cooperation, and the inventiveness born mainly out of necessity, but also the resource-friendly economic models, as well as the socially integrative force of the informal economy, provide a valuable basis for a just transition to a green future. Just to say that we have maybe also to change our view on the informal economy. New approaches are needed here, and the TVET community could learn also from other sectors, for instance, from projects which are implemented in the agriculture or biotrade sector and which have skill components. And last but not least, a crucial perspective is on transforming governance by including new actors and focusing also on local and regional levels, for instance, in building transition communities, which will also empower women and young people to become agents of change, because in many cases, they are the groups who don't benefit much from the current status quo. So they might also be those who are more ready to change something. So I will come back to some of these aspects in more details in the next presentation. But I would invite you also to take a look at the paper and to discuss all these aspects in the working groups later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you see, you have a lot of material, very rich studies. It's not that easy to summarize, but well done. Thank you so much for giving us an insight, yeah? And the rest is what you can then read and analyze on your own. Good. We are lacking a little bit behind of the schedule, but we will recover. And I want to give you the opportunity, at least if there is an urgent question here that you want to raise, and thank you for your patience, to the authors. This is a unique opportunity to ask or to comment if you have any question here. Just raise the hand. Thank you. So we allow one. We have a colleague with a microphone. Great.
Thank you. Esther from Circle Economy in the Netherlands, and I was really pleased to see the emphasis on social justice and decent work across all of the speakers. I'm particularly interested in the comments on how to work with the informal economy, because we know the green economy and the circular economy that I focus on is majority informal workers. And I wondered if you came across any inspiring examples or best practices of education institutions or other agencies working to integrate the informal sector.
Thank you very much. We will have some input on the informal sector as well, but maybe you can, with a short answer, answer to this question.
Yes, thank you. It works. Okay. Thank you for the question. Yes, I hope we will have lots of opportunities to discuss practical examples of such projects. There is one project which is very close to my heart, I could say, in South Africa, and it's not a TVET project. It's a project in the field of biotrade, where they have engaged with elderly people who have a very good knowledge of plants and of what you can do with these plants, and they have established a system of mentoring, so to give this information to young people. And this, I like this example because it's a little bit at the margins of TVET, or it's not what we usually understand as being TVET, but it shows very well that we have to broaden a little bit our perspective. So it's not something we should do everywhere and in any case, but I think it transports this thinking, what Margareta said also about valuing local knowledge and contextualizing also what we put in curricula and in training programs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you for your patience. We will see you again, Lena, here on stage. Thank you, Margareta and Kirsten. All the best to South Africa. Thanks a lot. This is your applause. And now we have a lot of food for thought. We have heard data, new perspectives and aspects, and now we want to use this to rethink how our TVET systems should align for a green future. We will have a panel discussion now. I'm really looking forward to it. The main question is, how can we close policy and skills gaps in the just transition? And with this, I'm very happy to welcome my guests who will shed light on this issue from different perspectives. And please welcome with me first Dr. Heike Kuhn, Head of Education Division at BMZ. Ms. Esther Goodwin-Brown, please come on stage. Esther is consultant at UNESCO-UNEVOC and lead for Jobs Initiative, Circle Economy. Thank you. And let's welcome Ms. Christine Hoffmann from ILO. She is Skills and Employability Specialist. Thank you for being with us. Great. You will find wherever you want to sit. You will find the microphones if you want to use them. Just turn on. Great. So we have to recover some time. That's why I'm asking you for some precise and short answers. But let me start with you, Dr. Kuhn. Yeah. The first question is, what is Germany's commitment to promote the green TVET? And maybe you can also link to what we've heard today. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Not yet.
Now, can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. Yeah, of course. Thank you, first of all, for having me here, and thank you for having been part of this interesting discussion before and the inputs. This makes my life easier, and I will change a little bit from what is written on my papers, because first I would like to deliver a message why TVET, and the previous speakers, they have alluded to it. What are we facing? We are facing a world challenging climate change. You all know this. We are just in the midst of what had happened in Libya. We have seen how climate change, how devastating the consequences are, and we need to adapt. We see the shortage of workers. And I would like to say just some words. Why is TVET so important? A previous speaker said something, women and other marginalized people before. And I'm a woman. I'm a part of half of the world's population, and I think we really need to rethink our world, the world how it is. So I don't feel like a marginalized group. So we have to think at all of it. So Bohan Shakuni also alluded to it. What is about TVET? It's about learning, lifelong learning, but it's also about getting jobs, being a part of the society. So this is why we want to reach out to young persons, and this is so important. Not everyone will go to university. So I don't like this only looking to academic professions. So we need TVET, and we need TVET for adapting to climate change. So this was my start. So now on the priority areas, and another important aspect I wanted to come back, what the previous speakers has said, look at the demographics, what's on. The world is young, not in my country here in Germany, but in many other countries. If you go to Africa, to Asia, to other parts of the world, it's young persons and they need perspectives. And this is what we are faced with every day. If we look into the news, migrants coming over the Mediterranean Sea, they want perspectives for themselves and their situations. So in a way, climate change and what is ongoing is also a big chance that we can finally maybe adjust the way we are living, the way we work. So this was a little bit a start. But just transition is one, of course, of our BMZ's priority areas, and this is what we're looking for, vocational training. You know, Germany, my country, we are strong on this as Austria and as Switzerland, and this is has a long history. You cannot adapt our system to other countries as such, but it is a kind of an example that the society as a whole understands that young persons have to learn and have to work. At the same time, you cannot just work without understanding what you're doing. And if you are a plumber nowadays, or if you put in, you have to understand that you have to be mindful with the resources that can end, and you have to think about sustainability and how to use energy. So I will stop here to leave because I was asked to be short, but I wanted to start a little bit the other way around to make it more lively. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, great. Question to you. ILO. The question is, why do we need a just transition on top of greening the economies? We have heard so much why it's important, but isn't it enough with the greening of economies? So what is ILO's guidance on this topic?
Let's see, is it working? Thank you very much. Let me take you back over 100 years in 1919. Some visionary policy makers got together and founded the International Labour Organization in order to set minimum social standards around the world. And social justice was already ingrained in the genes of our organization then. It took the ILO until 2008 to publish its first Green Jobs report, until 2012 to publish our first Skills for Green Jobs report, and until 2015, as you can see on the slide, to develop our Just Transition framework, Just Transition towards environmentally sustainable economies and societies for all. And this year at the International Labour Conference, where all our members come together, member states confirmed their commitment to this Just Transition framework and have come up with conclusions that sort of have the standing of an international instrument. And let me just share some of the content that's in these conclusions on just transitions. It's where the ILO members, all 187, recognize that our future is at risk because of the environmental changes we are seeing, is at stake. And that there are a number of guiding principles that should help us in addressing this just transition. And a lot of these have to do with the core values of the organization of social justice, being social dialogue. So basing all our decisions on how to move towards just transitions in exchange, consultation, and dialogue with the key actors of the labor market, hence workers, employers, and government. There's also a section in there that speaks about the role of workers and employers' organizations. And they're called upon not only to engage in these just transition plans, but also to create a culture of lifelong learning. And I think it's very important to recognize their role in all these debates. Well, then, we have the conducive environments and the and access to technology and all other items that are important. So if we move to the next slide, you will see the importance of skills, and I'm getting to some of the findings, and thanks to the team of authors who has made reference to this study from 2019, where two different scenarios have been calculated with the expected job losses, but also the job creation potential. And a part of those people that are expected to lose their jobs will very easily be able to move to either a more energy sustainable or a circular economy scenario. But a big chunk of people needs significant reskilling. And that's where we really have to put our emphasis. And in my last slide, I would just like to, the next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. Mention that in addition to skills being a very important dimension in making transitions just, we should always keep in mind, and I very much like the term you used about transformative TVET, how skills can act as a driver in their own right. They also build resilience, but they act as a driver. And so we have sort of come up with these two different types of goals, the light green and the deep green goal, where the deep green, I'm not going through everything, I'll let you just read through, where we really see how systematic changes in TVET can happen with a broad and encompassing and integrated approach towards this. Thank you.
Jonathan, thank you very much. But there's more data, correct, Esther? Maybe linking to this as well, circular economy with UNESCO-UNEVOC. You have done some research on institutional gaps that exist for just transition. I understood there is 3 countries ongoing research now with 3 countries in Africa. And yeah, from this research, what comes out? What are the observed gaps that you see in the TVET systems?
Is this working? Yes. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here with you all today. So indeed, my organisation, Circular Economy, has just completed this study. And in fact, we have some draft summary versions for you over here for you to read, where we're looking at the knowledge and capacity that TVET personnel and institutions themselves need to upskill people, because as several of the speakers already introduced, we need to upskill the personnel in order to be able to really upskill students and workers to be part of the circular economy. So that was our specific focus. Circular economy is part of the green agenda. And we focused on 3 countries where there's already ongoing work upskilling TVET personnel for the circular economy. So we focused on Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa, and surveyed 27 stakeholders and 13 institutions across these countries. And we found lots of interesting findings, but one of the first initial findings was that both TVET providers and associations recognize that topics like the circular economy are really key, and that there's increasing demand for them, as we've also seen introduced. But providers felt very constrained to respond to this need because of capacity gaps that they had. And then on the other side of things, over half of the TVET authorities that we interviewed recognized that they weren't adequately supporting these TVET providers. So there was consensus, but clearly not quite a match. And perhaps one of the reasons for this gap we determined is that TVET authorities themselves that we surveyed actually felt that circular economy is more likely to impact future jobs, future occupations, and isn't a current priority. Whereas we know this is problematic. We need to be upskilling people now to develop the pipeline of skills we need to shift current workers and also make the changes that we need in advance. So really create that pipeline of skills that's required. And then when we look more closely at the findings of the results, we also looked we found 4 factors that seem to be in different contexts, either enabling the capacity of TVET institutions or limiting them. So you see here on this diagram, and these 4 factors in different contexts could indeed be really enabling or putting in place barriers. So the first, policy and regulatory frameworks. So the need for conductive policy and regulatory environments, which can in particular create challenges for TVET providers that are operating where they're very tightly bound to the direction of national policy. Industry engagement and partnerships, so the ability to really engage with industry to support timely and relevant updates to curricula. And the curricular development itself. We heard from many of the TVET providers that the process of updating and creating new curricula isn't easy, and then can be issues along the way. And the investment in TVET, the institutions, but also the resources, the infrastructure and the equipment that they need to really upskill people for the skills that are required. And yeah, although we could see in some cases this created barriers, it's also very encouraging to see the examples where this was really driving people forward. So for example, with University Cape Coast in Ghana, all new TVET programs that are being developed are including a course on the circular economy. and this institution is also going to lengths to look at existing curricula and identifying where it's also relevant to include modules on the circular economy there. So some great examples, but also some challenges.
Thank you very much. On now. I understand that the study, or the synthesis report of the study, is available at the table there as well. So thanks a lot for those first insights, and good to hear that there are enablers and not only barriers. Dr. Kuhn, if we think about now about greening economies and TVET, from your point of view and what you've heard, where are the challenges for the German Development Corporation, and what is needed regarding policies and measures that should be taken to support a just transition?
Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me again? No, you still have questions. Now? Yes. Okay. So, see, this is a challenge for me. I can learn. Okay. I would like to focus on 2 or 3 points. First of all, on the partner countries. We see sometimes there is a strong focus on the technological aspects of just transition. This is a challenge because it's one thing to have just the machines or the infrastructure, but having this for the green infrastructure, there is the big will, the big interest, but sometimes we feel that there's our partners pay too little attention, maybe we also, to the fact that this requires qualified staff. Because you need persons who know how to use, how to train others, how to use it. My boss, when she was speaking, we also put this is on the teachers. The teachers are so important, or the teachers for vocational training. Just an example. In renewable energies, for example, it's not enough to build a hydropower plant or just produce solar panels. You also have to know how to use them and how to have them on, to maintain them, installation, maintenance, and all this. Sometimes my previous speakers also speak about future jobs. From my point, it's not future jobs, it is the jobs of today. So the future is always today. We can always do this, and this shows the urgency. We have to do this today. And therefore TVET is so important, because we need now to train young persons to the new jobs, but also reskill, upskill the others. I would also like to mention the informal economy. We have heard this also before. There's a lot of people not having been trained in the systems we are in, and we learned from the study before also that we tend to forget these people because we are in this. This is where also our system maybe should be more transformative. I can just agree with the outcome of the study. So this is where we have to go. And I would also like to be a little bit, to do some self-criticism on the film. You have, when you came here, we have seen this film, and there was this lady, Plummer was the man, but there was a lady from South Africa, somewhere in Africa, and she was a technician. This works in some places, but there's another big barrier. And I would like to say this also, we follow a feminist development policy. We want a just world, a just transition, but sometimes, and this is also what we learn in our daily work, sometimes gender perspectives hinder young, talented women to do to use their talents, because the societies don't allow them to go into TVET. And I just wanted to put this here also on stage, or to let you think about this. So with all the nice things we're thinking about, our procedures, the framework, all this, it's always human beings and their ideas. If a young lady somewhere thinks, if I do this job, I will never will never be attractive to young men or partners, nowhere will we. This is also a big barrier, and we should think about this, especially in TVET. So I think this is, I can stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And Esther, if you think now about the institutions, if we want to strengthen, let's say, the TVET institute institutions and their ecosystems they work in regarding curricula and qualifications. So what is needed from your point of view? Because as you said, we're all human beings, institutions are composed of human beings as well. So what would be your recommendations, and maybe how can the support of organizations like UNEVOC look like?
Hear me? Ah, yes, it's still on. Great. Yes, so looking at the role of institutions, I mean, the four common factors that I outlined before can point to where institutions can play a role to unlock where there are barriers. And when we looked at these, we also tried to think what gaps do they lead towards and what role can institutions play in closing that gap. And we've summarized them as the three that you can see here on the screen. So the first is bridging the knowledge gap. So educators themselves need to have knowledge of the circular economy, of the broader green transition, the skills that are needed, but also the local, the regional, and the global trends that will impact what skills are needed today and in the future. And only once educators themselves have this knowledge can they then go on to upskill people in the way that we need to keep up with the urgent challenge. And we see that UNEVOC can play a really important role here as a knowledge broker. So producing data and evidence on key changes, key macroeconomic changes, key agendas like the circular economy and the skills that are needed in collaboration with leading institutions that TVET providers, authorities, policymakers can all use to develop their offerings and their approach, understand their role much better, and create the enabling environment that we need to respond to all of these things. And the report that we've just produced, I hope, is a good example of this, working with UNESCO-UNEVOC. The second you see here is the implementation gap. So often educators might see that green and circular economy skills are very needed, but then, as I mentioned before, struggle to really implement that within their offerings. And I know this is a trend that's supported by previous research done by the ILO and UNESCO that's found, I think, across 100 countries that were surveyed. The demand is there for the skills, but there's still barriers to really integrating it in vocational curricula. And particularly in countries where the process of updating curricula might be quite bureaucratic, it's only allowed at fixed intervals. This really limits the ability of TVET to be responsive, as was indicated by one of the earlier speakers. And UNEVOC can play a key role here, and with much of the work they're already doing. So as was referenced, the BUILT program that looks at how new qualifications and competencies can be really put into practice, and trying to make these new careers future-orientated, make them attractive, unlock some of the social stigma that might be connected to them. And in fact, last year we worked with UNEVOC to directly train trainers and developed micro-learning for students within vocational colleges on the circular economy, which is an example of where there's the demand and institutions already want to start integrating these into their curricula. Giving very tangible bite-sized modules that can already create exposure to staff and students is a great step. And then lastly, the exposure gap. So here we're referring to the need for education systems to expose their students to the practical application of the skills that they need, and also the different technologies and strategies they need to be working with. So demonstration centres, work-based learning, apprenticeships. And there's a fantastic example from the eastern part of South Africa where a power plant has been repurposed into a training facility for renewable energy, which I think is fantastic, because it's not only a place of learning, but it's also a place of learning about the transition itself. But of course, the ability to expose your students to these new innovations is quite dependent on how local you are to where this is happening, the proximity. The closer you are, the easier it will be to expose your students to hands-on experiences of these new innovations. And I think UNEVOC can play a really key role here as an international network, supporting interagency cooperation, as was referred to earlier, to really share and learn between institutions, within and across regions, share best practices, organise exchange visits if that's possible and green. And I know this is something that UNEVOC is already doing through their learning programs, but I'm sure could be deepened much more. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina, the recommendations that you've heard here, and thank you for illustrating those gaps as well. Does this work for the informal economy as well? So you are expert in informal economy, and from your point of view, what policies have to be in place to meet the needs of both of the formal and the informal economy? How can we handle this? Thank you.
Yeah, all right. Thank you. Let me start by just making some conceptual remarks, then talk about the policies, and then add an example as well. So I was very happy to see so much focus on the informal economy by basically all speakers and in all your publications. You know, the ILO has a long history working on the informal economy, and there's also an international recommendation that I strongly recommend all of you to look at, which has tripartite language. It's called the Recommendation on the Transition to the Formal Economy, number 204. So the informal economy is a very diverse economy. When we speak about people in informal employment, we mean people in informal sector enterprises, and we mean people employed in formal sector enterprises, but informally employed. So informal employment is in both the formal and the informal sector. And when we look at the educational level of people in informal and informal employment, we've seen a pattern that is the same across all regions globally, that the risk of being in informal employment is higher the lower your educational level is. So that's clear. So we need to invest in skills also to get people out of the informal economy. Yet when we talk about the just transition, we also need to acknowledge that the path to travel is longer for people in the informal economy. And so there is a double challenge to address. And we have a number of sectors as well that are important for just transitions that have very high levels of informality. But we also have some sectors, and I've added, now if you go one further, an example from Nigeria, where actually in the decentralized renewable energy sector, only 30% of people work informally, and that's much lower than the national average in Nigeria. So there's definitely also a potential there. So what are the different policy messages and things we should think of? And already in your study, you have a lot of great pointers. It's about increasing access to skills and to training that is tailored to the needs of people in the informal economy. Opportunity costs are higher for them to join any training, so it needs to be very tailored to their context. We also need to think about solutions that can work for several, so we need to think about organizing, working through business associations or professional associations of workers in the informal economy. And as has been pointed out, we need to look at how skilling already happens in the informal economy. And the one traditional system we see in many countries to different extents is what we call informal apprenticeship or traditional apprenticeship. And some countries have taken the path to fully recognize that this is a training system in their country, and they work towards including it in national skills systems. And there are also some very nice GIZ projects in Ghana, for example, that have worked on this. And so bringing additional skills into the system through training of the master craftspeople, but also training of apprentices is key. And then another policy measure is the recognition of prior learning. So giving access to formal certificates so that skills become visible of people, and transitions to formal employment are easier. I've just been on mission to Bangladesh, where we have a big skills portfolio, and over a decade ago worked with UNICEF and BRAC, one of the large NGOs there, on a model to improve informal apprenticeship in Bangladesh. And I was very happy to see that actually this program is still running by BRAC. They've reached over 120,000 people. And it is leading to, as one of the outcomes, it's leading to a delay in child marriage, in early child marriage, because women who participate in apprenticeship in small businesses would delay them. So, you know, we have additional development outcomes if we think about the informal economy as a lever of just transitions as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So we can see so many perspectives, stakeholders, parameters to be taken into consideration. Thank you so much for your insights and your perspectives. And even if time is short, I've seen some faces, some heads nodding and approving or not. Maybe there is one question or remark or comment that you want to make. I will allow one, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Muhammad Ali. I'm working in Ethiopia in a TVET project. Sounds very good to ears that you take off from the practical side of it and get into a bit of theory. Maybe that was somewhere in earlier presentation as well, deep down somewhere, but it was not so profoundly for me visible, the role of the private sector. Without the private sector, we can talk about the what part, but the how part will always be not achievable. So I would wish that if there is something, especially when it comes to such forums, we saw in the morning also the starting, the private sector participation, very thin. Partnerships which have grown in different countries, there are examples that needs to be popularized, most sensitize people, policymakers, because the context that I work, it needs a lot of work to be done when it comes to awareness, and also our national partners to allow some of the space for the private sector to lead. Okay. So this whole steering of this whole agenda, without private sector, I don't see that we will be able to achieve the results that we are looking at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who wants to answer? I'll ask for a short answer. Anything you want to comment on?
Does it work? Yeah. We take this on board. Thank you. Yeah, we see this.
Thank you very much for this highly important comment. Any TVET system only works when it is built on a strong involvement of the private sector, but both employers and workers. I mean, I've made that comment in the beginning when referring to the just transition, but I think it's very important as well when you want to lead change towards a green transition, that you identify your key industry leads as well, that have something to say and to show and to influence, and to get them on board in your dialogues. Thanks.
Thank you. you wanted to comment on.
Yeah, there's one question from the chat also from our online participants, a dear colleague of GIZ. She's asking if it's really, the green skills really have a disruptive character, or if the education sector and economic sector could cooperate better together, and this would already respond to the challenges. So do you think it's rather disruptive, or we just need more collaboration on private and public sector?
I'll comment briefly on that. I think looking at things in a different way can be seen as disruptive, I think in a positive way. And working in a green economy, in a circular economy in particular, does require a different mindset. But I think one of the things we see is the application of a skill will be green if it's applied in a green business. It will not if it's applied elsewhere. So it's very context dependent. But what becomes quite unique as part of the green transition, and specifically the circular economy, is the combination of skills that are required. So we talked a lot about transversal skills, but also deep specialisms that are really needed to understand how can you build something with materials that have been used before, rather than following a certain manual. So it's less about disruption, it's more about combining different disciplines. So indeed, working with different members of the private sector through a value network as well as a value chain, as was described earlier, would very much support this.
Thank you very much. Great. I mean, we could talk a lot longer, and I'm sure it would be extremely interesting, but we will move now from this policy level more to a practical level. So thank you for this insights, for your opinions and inputs. Thanks a lot. Great. Would be a nice moment for a break now, but we still have to work a little bit. I know this is the hard part, but this was 2 out of 5 studies now. I will ask Lena then to take let's say, shorten the inputs, or maybe be very precise so we can recover some time. But what is next now? Before you will have time to exchange and discuss, and now you talking, we still want to introduce to you those 3 sectoral studies. So we want to dive deeper now in a more practical way to 3 sectors that were the basis for those 3 studies. And we will complement this with 2 practical projects, the experiences from Kenya and Mongolia. So let's see a little bit what is your interest here and what is interesting for you, which sectors you are interested. So that's why I would jump before you start with, again, some energy for you. We do this question again, yeah? You stand up if you say, okay, this answer fits for me. So the question now is, which sector are you most interested in greening? Could be energy, construction, mobility, agriculture, or other. So again, and I think this is good for our bodies also to stand up, move, and then sit down again. So who of you is most interested in the sector of energy? Stand up, please. Yeah, could be already a technical discussion group. Yeah, and you can move a little bit because it's good. Thank you very much. What about construction? Yeah. Great. Yeah, thanks a lot. What about mobility? Perfect. Have a look around. Probably those are your partners for the technical discussions group. Yeah, and you can move. And agriculture. Great. Thank you. And other. Da. What is other? Maybe you can just tell us. Okay. What about you? Okay. Cross-sector. Yeah? Great. Okay. Thanks a lot. Great. Because then you have seen, okay, who else is interested in your sector, and probably then we want to go to the technical discussions. You will meet those people again. So what we will do now is we hear the key messages from the 3 sectoral studies. I will ask you to stick to the time and even shorten it if possible. Yeah, and let's start with the first one. It's about renewable energies.
Oops. Okay.
Thank you.
It's about energy, and I will start right away. So on this graph, you can see the different types of renewable energy sources and installed capacities in Africa and Asia. So the biggest growth potential for Africa and Asia is considered to be in wind and solar energy, while in some regions, for instance, such as the Rift Valley in Africa, there is also good potential for geothermal energy, and in some regions also for sustainable biomass energy production. Because of its key role in the green and just transition, the German government has set a focus on renewable energy sector in its development cooperation policy. And so let's take a look at the impact of energy transition on employment. And I will save a little bit of time because you already know this slide. So I won't go into details, but I think it illustrates very well the challenge facing TVET system to provide initial training and also and upskilling to people in the energy sector. So particular attention should also be paid in a just transition perspective to those 2 million people who will probably lose their jobs in declining industries and not move into renewable energies, because they will need targeted support with access to skills and qualifications, but also, and that's very important, complementary labor market services and social benefits in order to find new income sources. So the transition to renewable energies will not only affect employment quantitatively, but also in terms of changing skills requirements and required qualifications. So according to the ILO, the most important changes will take place at medium and high skill levels. So new occupations are more likely to emerge at higher skill levels, for instance, energy consultants or wind turbine technician, and less skilled workers, they usually need only or mostly greater environmental awareness and adaptations to their changing work tasks or tools. So while it sounds like a common sense recommendation, these changing skills requirements at different qualification levels, they show how essential it is to start any TVET intervention with an analysis of work tasks and local or regional skills ecosystems. In most cases, there is no sufficient empirical basis available in partner countries to revise or develop occupational profiles and curricula, and simply transferring curricula from industrialized countries does not work well, because the skills must be adapted to the context, and the surroundings also must be taken into account. So especially in a transition context, too narrow and specialist skills, they might not be enough to make a living for self-employed workers. So for instance, when you look at the informal sector, training only solar installer might not be enough to make a living if the market for solar panel is still too small. So in any case, also transversal green competences should be integrated in all curricula and in all forms of vocational education. This is what I referred to as green literacy a moment ago. And the aim is to raise awareness of sustainable development and to empower people to act in an environmentally friendly, climate friendly, and resource saving way in their working and living environment. So based on interviews with development cooperation projects and the analysis of project documents, The sectoral study on energy makes a series of recommendations, which I will only rapidly name. So first of all, and as a general rule, just energy transition principles should be followed in all interventions. So among others, this includes to broaden access to energy provision for parts of the population that are still excluded from sufficient access to energy. And this also includes to develop decent income and employment opportunities in alternative sectors for those affected by structural transformations, such, for instance, as the coal phase-out. Second recommendation, renewable energy and TVET programs or projects should be linked. So cross-sectoral and integrated approaches are best suited to ensure that skills and employment opportunities develop hand in hand. And strategies for the expansion of renewable energy should, for instance, not be limited exclusively to the promotion of renewable energy, but also take into account green employment promotion and green vocational training. Already that is important in the planning phase. So cross-sectoral approaches, they should also be used not only at strategy level, but at project level. And we have some examples also among GIZ projects, for instance, in Brazil, where renewable energy projects have included a component on skills development, and that was quite effective in terms of job placement. And also, we spoke about it, private sector participation in TVET. And in the case of standalone TVET and renewable energy projects, because it's not always possible to link them into one project, so the link should or could be done at least in terms of organization and also personnel at the very bottom level. A third recommendation is to promote employment promotion and active labor market measures. So think of those 5 million on the first chart who will have to transition from one branch of the energy sector to another. They will need career guidance and information on available job opportunities. And so this can include, for instance, to support partner countries to develop skills forecasting and labor market research, but also, what I said, to facilitate the linkage between training and job placements at the micro level, also through career counseling. And last but not least, we spoke about it already, the participation in TVET of the private sector, and I would add also, referring to the vision paper, the participation from civil society organizations and from local or regional authorities, and of course also from workers' associations. So this is about putting into practice new forms of governance in TVET. And the challenge, the specific challenge for the renewable energy sector is that this sector is hardly organized in most countries. And so in many partner countries, there is a lack of business associations, and capacity building can be needed there. But yeah, capacity building is also often needed among workers in the old carbon-intensive energy sectors to steer and manage the transition. So for some examples of good practice and lessons learned from past projects, I will invite you to look at the sector studies as soon as they are published, and I look forward also to the discussions in the later discussion groups. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. If you want, you can stay with us because you will present the next sector studies as well. But thank you for sticking to the time, for summarizing. I don't feel that bad about pressing so much on time, because you will have the opportunity to dive deeper into the sector, to discuss in the technical discussion groups, and the study is already online, correct? So you can check it out, and thank you so much. But we will try to see, okay, what about the practicality and the technical, or let's say the practical check. of this study. We try to link now the study again and see, okay, what does it mean to put these recommendations into practice and how greening of TVET works in the example of Kenya, especially when it comes to adopting system level and institutional level skill strategies for the renewable energies. And for this, I ask you to welcome with me on stage Mr. William Osawa. Thank you very much. He is Deputy Director for Research and Development of the TVET Authority in Kenya. Thank you for being with us. The floor is yours. And again, I will also ask you to stick to the time frame and give us a precise and insight in what's happening in Kenya. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Well, at the beginning of this forum, I was seeing as if the male gender is sort of down a bit. But after some examination, I noted within myself, but I would like somebody to do a study that basically when we consider the world, the ladies usually have got are much better caregivers, and therefore they even care much about the world. And that is why you can see more of them in these issues of greening, which is actually taking care of the world. Now, I would like to make some short presentation of some of the issues that you have done in Kenya. And I know the time is relatively short, so I'll just give some examples. I will not dive so much into so much details. So on my work, I will be checking on some of the issues that I'll be checking on is the effects of climate change in Kenya, the recent effects, the greening initiatives that have been done within Kenya. And I will also basically look at the regional, that is the continental outlook. And then I will also move to the greening TVET in Kenya. And then I will also briefly talk about the Bear2 project. And then from there, I will come to some of the challenges that are basically facing the greening within the Kenyan context. I was briefly looking around to see whether there was anybody who was having some sleep, but I saw that there was none. In chemistry, we normally encourage people to sleep, and especially when I come to the land of Kekule. Kekule was a German chemist who actually discovered the structure of benzene, and he discovered this when he was seeing a vision. So even at this time when you're discussing greening like this, if you have a short sleep, you can be able to see a vision, and that vision can help us actually to overcome all these problems that you're thinking about here on the issues of greening. So, well, some of the effects that you have had in Kenya over the climate change, and this one is why we are basically thinking about greening. Now, we have had issues of mass deaths of both domestic and wild animals, and this one as a result of climate change. So some of the regions in Kenya have actually had drought for more than 5 years, something that has never been experienced in the past. This one has brought with it a lot of human suffering and poor health. As I've talked about the prolonged drought in most parts of the country. Then you have also had intermittent flooding in some parts of the country, as well as human-wildlife conflicts. Now, in order to overcome some of these issues that I've mentioned, the government has been very keen, and our current president has been very keen on issues of greening. And this one has even made him to be appointed as one of the chairs of climate change for the head committees of the African states. And some of the initiatives that have been brought about by the government is the enactment of Climate Change Act and the development of Climate Change Action Plan and Policy. Then we also have implementation of presidential directive that aims at planting 15 billion trees by 2032. As we are aware, trees are some of the most important carbon trapping systems. So if we can plant more trees, then it is possible that at one time we can have a net zero emission. We will still be emitting, but all those emissions will be absorbed. So if we can be able to do that, then it is important that we can actually be able to end up with a situation where we have a net zero. Then restoration of deforested or degraded landscape and promotion of less polluting fuels. And in this case, in Kenya, we have actually been promoting e-mobility. We are talking about the use of electric motorbikes as well as the use of electric buses, which are eventually going to lead to lower emission of carbon, which is one of the most the widespread greenhouse gas that has been causing the global warming. Now, this one is just something that I would like to briefly just talk about. Having said that the president has been very much involved in issues of global greening, the Kenya last week, actually, we had the world leaders, not only from Africa, but all from the rest of the world. As you're aware, we cannot implement greening in silos. It is important that if you implement greening, then we must all work together. That is the only way that we can be able to do this. And that is because whatever is being emitted in Germany does not only affect Germany, but has got effects in all other parts of the world. So last week, the African leaders converged in Nairobi, and the main work for this, they are discussing about the driving green growth and climate finance solutions for Africa and the rest of the world. The aim of the conference was actually to ensure that the Africans take some common ground on what they are going to be discussing during the COP28 that is going to be held from November 30th up to around 12th of December 2023. Now, it is now important for us also to talk about some of the reforms that have been brought about in the TVET subsector in Kenya. Now, the Kenyan government places a lot of emphasis on the TVET sector, and we have actually done a lot of investment in the construction and equipping of institutions with modern equipment. Now, one of the concepts that we came up with was that in Kenya, we have 290 constituencies. Each and every constituency, we are supposed to build a TVET institution, which we normally refer to as the TVC. We have three main classes. That is the national polytechnics at the highest level. Then you have the TVC, and then at the lowest level, we have the vocational training centers. So we are to build 290 in each and all the constituencies to improve access. And then we have also implemented other reforms. And these ones are basically based on the international best practices. And this one has included the establishment of key agencies, one of them being TVET Authority, where I work. TVET Authority is the overall regulator of all the TVET institutions. And then you also have TVET CDAC, that is the Curriculum Development Assessment and Certification Council. And then you also have the Kenya National Qualification Authority, which is supposed to be a custodian of all the standards of the training standards in all over the country. And we are also implementing what we call the CBET, that is the competency-based education and training, as well as the dual training. The dual training is being supported by the GIZ. And the main work for doing this is to ensure that we mitigate the skills mismatch and also improve skill anticipation, which is caused by the technological changes. Now, in Kenya, we have also established the Kenya Green Economy Strategy. And this one is integrated in the education and training, and it focuses on green growth, carbon credit, clean production, as well as the establishment of green jobs that I've just mentioned. Now, there are needs why we need to integrate green skills in the Kenyan TVET system. Now, key among these are what you have talked about as the climate changes, which has greatly affected Kenya, new labor market requirements, rapid changes in technology, transitions in green and digital economies, as well as the demographic and labor migrations. So since we have continuous movement of labor, it is important that when any worker from Kenya moves to another country, then he should be having skills that are actually recognized in that particular country. And since all over the world we are moving towards greening, then it is important that we in Kenya also do the same. Now, the initiatives that have been adopted in greening Kenyan TVET, we can divide this into greening the campus, greening the curriculum, as well as greening the community. And one of the issues when it comes to greening the campus, we, as TVET authority, which is the overall regulator of the TVET institutions, one of the issues that we have incorporated in our quality assurance and accreditation tools is greening. Whenever we are accrediting any TVET institution, we must check what aspects of greening are they implemented within the institution. And we are also talking about the continuous professional development. Now we realize that most of our trainers got their qualifications much earlier when the green qualifications were not there. So one of the aspects that you are now considering, because our work again is to accredit the trainers, we make sure that once we have accredited you as a trainer, your accreditation expires after every 3 years. Then we check, have you acquired new skills which are current in the market? Because we noted with concern that some of our trainers, for example, motor vehicle mechanics, they got their qualifications when you're still talking about the carburetor systems. Those systems are no longer there. We have now moved into better systems which are more energy efficient. So we want all our trainers to ensure that they continually upgrade their skills. And this one also we are also extending to our trainees. Then we have also established greening champions in the TVET institutions. Now this one was done during a training that was sponsored by UNEVOC in 2017. We trained what we call the energy champions from various regions of the country. And after their training, what we wanted them now to do is also to go and train in their regions so that we have more champions, and then this one is now extended. Now, these institutions are also involved in tree planting and use of energy-saving equipment. This one is something that they have been working on. Then you also have energy, water conservation and harvesting, wastewater treatment and recycling, as well as e-waste collection and recycling. A number of our TVET institutions are already doing this. All the e-waste they collect, some of the gadgets from those e-waste, they normally remove them and then they recycle in the various projects that they normally use for in their competitions. Then we also have the greening of the curriculum. We have environmental sustainability, and digital literacy has been integrated in all our CBET programs. So all our CBET programs have some components of environmental sustainability and digital literacy. Then our CBET curricula is now being developed not from the older forms where we used to have only the trainers developing the curriculum, but rather during the development of the curriculum, we normally involve the industry. And this one will ensure that the new skills are incorporated in the review of the curriculum that you are doing. Now, last year, we also had a BUILD conference, which was again sponsored by UNEVOC, and we were able to spread this information on greening, especially in the area of hospitality and tourism. Then greening of the community, again, we have a number of issues that are taking place. That is training of the community. Our TVET champions are actually training the community. Some of the people whom we call the Juakali artisans, they have actually been involved in the past few years in putting a lot of waste in our rivers. This is something that we are now rectifying through some training, as well as the industry as well. Then we are also involved in river restoration.
Excuse me for interrupting. No, I haven't. Faster. Yeah, 1 minute.
Finish. Thank you. So the Bear 2 project also helped a lot in the greening, and its main work was to increase a lot of our trainees and graduates in the area of solar and PV. And this one has also helped a lot in the environmental conservation. Now I've placed a link there That link will actually lead you to some of the documents that are developed under the PEAR2 project. We have some few constraints that have been facing in integrating greening in the Kenyan TVET. One of them being limited financing for implementation of the greening programs, high initial cost of installing the renewable energy equipment. Now we also have a weak manufacturing sector in Kenya, and then we also have some basically resistance to embrace new technology. I will end there because of time, but I know we'll still have some more time maybe to have some further discussions.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. And I hope you will join one of the discussion groups on the energy, so there will be opportunity as well to discuss with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Good. So 2 more sectors to go. One is the next one is a challenging one, a very relevant one for many projects, and it's a complex one. It's construction. What about sustainable construction? I've seen I think the construction group was like here. Again, Lena, I ask you to do a masterpiece here in summarizing the key messages from this sector. Thank you.
I will do my best. Thank you. So the last, no, it's not the last. Second of our sector, 3 sector studies is devoted to the construction sector, which is resource intensive and a major emitter of greenhouse gas. So buildings contribute worldwide 40% of energy-related CO2 emissions. But greening the construction sector is more than reducing green energy, reducing energy consumption through thermal installation, for instance. That's why it's such a complex sector, because it includes, for instance, also adequate planning for better transport connections, use of environmentally compatible building materials, avoiding the sealing of surfaces, sustainable water management, and much more. So the just transition to a green construction sector depends on a complex interplay of various stakeholders and factors that go much beyond the construction industry in a narrow sense. So to steer a successful transition, the construction industry must be viewed along the entire value chain, including the supply chains and occupations also related to the management of regulatory frameworks, and not to forget about the demand side. Ultimately, the chain depicted in this PowerPoint should not be linear, but it should be rather circular, including also the dismantlement of buildings and recycling of building materials. But as it is on this PowerPoint, I think this chain illustrates well the variety of occupations to be found in the sector. And looking at the skills required in each of these clusters of occupations, it appears that on a higher or lower qualification levels, the skills requests or skills requirements are varying. While university qualifications are central, especially in the area of planning, TVET qualifications are more decisive in construction and maintenance, for instance. And this should be kept in mind. TVET is decisive, especially for construction, installation, maintenance, and occupations, but it is not sufficient. And so we need to look also beyond TVET at higher vocational education and training, and at higher education also. As a first conclusion from all that, it appears that development cooperation projects in the construction sector should adopt an integrated approach, so establishing links to higher education, for instance, but also providing sectoral policy advice or conducting public awareness campaigns to promote demand for green construction materials, and include also policy advice to adapt regulations and make incentives for the private sector to be more environmentally friendly. The transition to a green construction sector potentially impacts the labor market in two ways. So it will affect employment numbers on the quantitative side, as growth of certain industries will create employment while declining industries lose jobs, for instance, in the energy-intensive cement production. And it will also change the skill sets required for workers to do their work tasks, so that's more the qualitative change. And the construction sector is a large source of employment. Globally, it provides currently more than 7% of jobs and more than 13% of global GDP. And it is expected to continue growing, especially in Asia and Africa. The transition to a green construction sector is not expected to change the proportionate composition of the labor force on construction sites significantly, at least in the short term, but rather the increasing demand will extend across all skills levels. And in light of a just transition, the traditionally large proportion of unskilled workers in the construction sector has implications for project design and TVET intervention, since a large part of them is considered specifically vulnerable with low levels of education, precarious working conditions, and often informal employment conditions.
So maybe, Lena, we just read out the recommendations for the, if you agree on that, because we will have a discussion group on this as well. Okay. But then you can know, okay, what will you be talking about?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I didn't want to present all of them in detail, but just to focus on a few which are maybe more specific to the construction sector. So the first one I think I would like to highlight is to think about the entire value chain. And this has implications, as I said, into involving also universities and building, for instance, centers of excellence, or also strengthening the cooperation between different regulatory bodies who are responsible either for qualifications at higher education level or at vocational education level to develop hand-in-hand curricula and qualification pathways for this sector. And what I would like to highlight at the meso level is the interesting approach to develop TVET institutions as demonstration sites also, to make learners have a direct and personal experience of what green building can be. And at the micro level, there is an interesting approach also to further develop the link with local artisans and build up communities of practice, for instance, between teachers and local artisans, so that they can experience themselves together what it means to build something in a different way. And this can also foster acceptance, which is a very crucial point in the construction sector, because you need customers who want to pay for green buildings, and often it's more costly upfront. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lena. Again, thanks a lot. And you stay with us because there's one more to present, but as you can see, and as I can notice in the here as well, we will change a little bit, and sorry for rushing you through now the program, but we want to also to comply with the whole agenda, and we want to make a let's say a practicality check of the study as well. Now with a project coming from Mongolia, and thank you for being with us. Bolo, you already turned your camera on, and I will apologize. This is mainly my fault that we are lacking a little bit behind of time. So we will have your presentation, and I would just invite you to, in 2-3 minutes, just highlight how you are greening the construction sector there in Mongolia. And maybe we cannot see all your slides, but it would be really helpful to highlight the key messages. And sorry for cutting a little bit of time. Thank you for being with us.
So hello everybody, and thank you. And Actually, Michael is echoing. So my name is Paula Passenders. I'm responsible for developing PPP projects in the TV sector in Mongolia. And I'll introduce to you some examples of the projects we have done. Next slide, please. I'll be very quick. And so this project was implemented during the COVID time in Mongolia, so from 2019 to 2021. Its goal is actually improvement of the education quality in the field of construction of vocational education in Mongolia. And you can see there is the 6 Mongolian companies and 1 German company is involved in the implementation of the project. These companies are mostly construction material production companies. Next slide, please. So the brief background of Mongolia, that Mongolia is coldest city in the world. It reaches -40, and then we have the inefficient overshooting housing and misdimensioned heating systems, and also it's on the cold days the population of air pollution reaches 2.5 particles. That's actually 27 times higher than WHO recommendation. So the construction annual growth is 6%, and so then that's due to the heavy investment in the transport, electricity, housing, and mining. So that leads to the demand for the energy, because the energy thermal energy is stagnated because we are using Soviet era old thermal plant, and this is not much improved. So then that causes immense challenges in the country. Next slide, please. So we have 4 components, and first 2 is actually the development of training models and for initial training, and the training of the companies. And then third one is development online platforms, and fourth one is the cooperation with the government and then associations. Next, please. So I think it's my old presentation is here. So then we have okay, there are 27 models of 6 construction fields that developed and then approved by the nationwide. Also, relevant handouts formulated, and this all these products are actually integrated in the UTIVET Moodle system. The Moodle system is the TIVET knowledge platform is also introduced by the main TIVET project in the country. So 15 engineers and technicians trained as in-company instructors. Since it was a COVID time project, our first online training was organized by the Magdeburg Construction Center. And then so that online training was quite challenging. There was no practical training, less interaction. Then there was only Q&A session, and then small discussion was ongoing. So there are some, you can just move my presentation. I just very quickly. So the companies was actually contributing a lot to the project. They were supposed to be, but actually due to we are sandwiched between Russia and China, then due to the border closure, companies could not import the raw materials for the material production and so on. So the last 6 months of the project, the companies managed to train the teachers at the companies and received this students for the practical and short and long-term practical training, and also some awareness raising activities to the public that, for instance, how important is the insulation of the housing, especially in this weather in Mongolia. So the companies actually, the contribution was mostly the establishing the training set at the companies to receive all the to organize all this training. And these companies became the main active member of the professional board. It is 2 selected TVET schools. That means they have cooperation agreement established between the TVET school and then companies that they can receive the students for the long and short and practical training. Also can give feedback to the quality of the training and quality of the curriculum. So one of the main product is since it's a COVID project, we focused on the online platforms to awareness raising of the green construction. So the one was green construction online knowledge platform established at the cooperation with the Mongolian Builders Association. This is the main platform that you can receive the what is green construction, what is passive housing, what is energy efficient housing, what is green construction materials, and what is other technologies, what companies are considered doing green things. All this information you can find in this platform. The most professionals are using this platform. And so other ones, so since we could not organize that much online practical training, then we also want to introduce one more platform that's in building energy certificate system. It shows the energy efficiency of the housing and CO2 emissions of the housing. So this is the main instrument of the energy auditors. It performs unified national methodology and platform, loss of calculation, it saves loss of calculation, loss of time, and it's cost saving, and it prevents the auditors to deliberately change the default value, and it will be also external evaluation guarantee of the bank. So this system is actually the four main macro is echoing, could you please start? And there's a four groups are using this: buyers and contractors and investors in public administration. For the buyers, it's external evaluation and consumption of the cost for the energy, and then contractors, it's the improved understanding of the correct application of norms and rules, reputation and quality assurance. Investors, it can be external evaluation and risk mitigation, use of green resources. So the administration, it will be the monitoring implementation tool for the tool and planning policy measures against energy saving, air pollution, and climate change. It will be also the main evaluation for the mortgage and green loan procedures. That was the main outcome of the project. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I was very good.
I wanted to ask you for the last recommendations, but thank you for, and sorry for rushing you through for these insights. I hope this helps you as well for your discussions then in the technical discussion groups. Thank you for the presentation, Bolo. All the best to Mongolia.
Okay, thank you for having me here.
Thanks a lot. Great. And then, Lena, once more, sustainable mobility. Our last sector study, it's not yet published, but it will be there soon. And Lena promised as well, highlight the key messages. Thank you so much for that.
Exactly, thank you. So I was asked to rush a little bit through the presentation, but let me start by saying that the sector study on mobility is focused a little bit because the sector is so complex and broad. So it's focused on land-based road transport for passengers and goods, and with a special focus on urban areas. So what is sustainable mobility about? I think we can summarize this with 3 keywords. So avoid, meaning reduce need for traveling through smart city planning. Shift from personalized and individualized motorized vehicles to non-motorized vehicles and public transports, and improve the energy efficiency of vehicles, that is by promoting cleaner drive technologies and fuels and building the necessary infrastructure for that. So for the development of sustainable mobility system, it is also essential to couple new drive technologies with innovative usage models, so to link private and public and individual and shared forms of mobility. On the employment level, employment effects of transition to sustainable mobility, I will be very short by saying that it's more or less zero. So we create a lot of employments, but we destroy also a lot of employments. It's only if you take so indirect employment effects in the value chain that you really see positive effect of the transition on employment. So with related value chains like vehicle electrification, for instance. And even for countries who do not have a vehicle production, which is one of those branches bringing extra jobs, so to say, there is a potential for positive employment effects, and this is, for instance, through the electrification of vehicles, through locally adapted vehicle concepts, and the development or adaptation of mobility services to the local market. And this offers also opportunities for micro and small and medium enterprises. But this needs to be supported by national strategies, but also by skills development projects which promote business model development. So what are the implications for TVET? It's a little bit similar to what we saw in the other sectors, meaning that skills requirements for highly qualified workers will change most. But the biggest part of people working in that sector are not highly qualified. So it's also very important to have upskilling and reskilling programs, and also like everywhere else, green literacy, not to be forgotten. So I would like to focus more on the general recommendations for TVET interventions, and I will highlight here also a few. So those who are maybe more specific to mobility. First, we often see that private companies respond already with non-formal training programs to upskill their own workforces when they need new skills. So TVET interventions here, they could support this through, for instance, training of trainers or the development of training programs. And these non-formal programs, they should be developed with a view to later integration into the TVET system. So via, for instance, qualification frameworks. Another key recommendation is to develop higher vocational programs and link TVET and higher education. And third, I already mentioned the importance of setting up new mobility concepts, linking, for instance, collective and individual forms of mobility. And besides the usual entrepreneurship skills, the emergence of new business models can also be promoted by strengthening the cooperation between TVET institutions and startups, or by exposing learners to innovative business models and technologies. So not cooperating only with the usual suspects, but broadening a little bit the scope of enterprises which are involved in TVET. Mm-hmm. So finally, for just transition, it is important to set up employment-related retraining programs and to link them to complementary labor market. So if you allow me for just half a minute extra time, I would have liked to go through the room and ask you what are your takeaways of all these sectoral studies and projects, but I know we have no time for that, maybe in the break. I would like to highlight just very shortly three, which are my personal takeaways of this work. First is that cross-sectoral approaches are really very, very important. We should do more of that. Integrated approaches. Then skills development for transition is not only about formal TVET, but you should include also higher education, higher TVET, and also non-formal and informal forms of learning. And last but not least, it's a work in progress, because the transition is also happening in Germany and we don't know everything. So we are progressing in our understanding of transition. And this means that we have to learn together, the North and the South, and research and practitioners and policymakers together. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And sorry for rushing you through, but the good thing is that we will have some time for discussion, so it's not the last chance to talk to you. Thanks a lot for your patience. Yeah, my apologies for lagging a little bit behind there, but we will arrange our schedule. You deserve a break. We deserve a break, correct? I'm not sure if you enjoyed some sleep during the speeches. We will have 50 minutes of break now. Before you leave, you will get a little task from me again. We will come back here at 4:05. Yeah, 16:05. So you go out, enjoy the break, but you should think of something, and this something will be, okay, what do you want to talk about afterwards? So you heard a lot, we have a lot of recommendations, many opinions, many perspectives. Now it's up to you to choose a group you want to join. Yeah? We will meet after 50 minutes here again in the auditorium, and in the back you can see some signs with numbers of the groups. So we will split up to 5 groups, okay? 5 groups, and I will give you the choices where to choose from. Each group will meet in a separate room, will be accompanied by a GIZ colleague who will lead you to the room. You will have a lead and a rapporteur, and you can discuss. And then we come back and put this all together. And now I will rush myself through this part as well. So here on the screen, you see your choices. You have 5 options. One is to talk about renewable energy. And let me at least know you who you will talk with. The lead of this group is Ms. Mariam Kobalia, Gender and Economic Inclusion Lead for Renewable Energy and Just Transition, Skills and Employment at EBRD. This is group number 1. It's you. Welcome and thank you very much. So, group number 1. Group number 2, and I will not read the pitches because you know already what you can expect there, correct? Group number 2 will talk about sustainable mobility. Yeah, with Rohan Modi, advisor at the Transformative Urban Mobility Initiative. Where is he? Thank you. Your group lead, group number 2. Thank you so much. And have a good discussion. Group number 3. You will talk about construction. Yeah, this was the sector that we were rushing through. We heard the example from Mongolia. Maybe you have your own examples as well. You will discuss with Esther. You already know her. And Apurva Shankar. I hope I pronounce it well, for circular economy. So maybe you can just stand up. Yeah? So your group leads here. Group number 4 will discuss now on cross-cutting issues, TVET for green cities. Mr. Lina Chatsikristou from CEDEFOP. Welcome, your group lead. And it's all about the employment and skills trends for smart and green cities, the occupations that are key for supporting it, and for cities to become greener. That's the topic, good practices exchanges. And group number 5 will discuss with Inga Schallau, yeah, from Welthungerhilfe Germany, Skills Development Advisor and Coordination in the Skills Up program. Thank you. And Amy Poole. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Yeah, thank you. Professor from the Niagara College in Canada. And you will discuss about agri-food systems, an extremely interesting and big sector as well. It's about formal and informal education, the agri-food systems with their environmental impacts, but also take up our minds and come back, please, at 4:05. Our versions, this means that we will meet again at 4:50, so in 55 minutes. Enjoy your break and come back for the closing. Thank you.
Wird eine Gruppe auch hier bleiben?
Are you a rapporteur? Agri-Food Group. Agri-Food Group is back. Ah, okay. So we Agri-Food Group, rapporteur, welcome on stage. Great. Good. So, final act of this event. I hope you had a wonderful time. Time is always short in those discussion groups, and the bigger the group, the shorter the time. But I still hope you could get some interesting inputs, did some reflections, got to know people you are interested to exchange further. We will now wrap up the sessions. Welcome back to our virtual audience as well. So what's missing now? We will hear, and thank you for being with us here on stage, we will hear a very short summary what happened in the technical discussion groups from the 5 rapporteurs. But as you can see, we have another, not guest, because you are our host here on stage. Welcome, Mr. Friedrich Hübler, head of UNESCO-UNEVOC, and thank you for being with us. You will help us to wrap up and with some conclusions and remarks for closing this event. So thank you. A warm applause to all our rapporteurs, Mr. Hübler. Thanks for being with us. So while you can still think about your summary, because it has to be precise and short, I would have a first question to you. And make it, since we're in the closing, let's take a look back to where we started from today with the vision paper. And last year you presented the strategy, the UNESCO strategy on TVET. And I would be interested, how does this go along? Are there any linkages and convergence to that?
Okay. Thank you, Ingrid. And first of all, thank you also for being here and for giving me this opportunity to talk to you today. First, maybe I'll talk about the differences between the UNESCO strategy for Tibet and the vision paper that we heard about today. So UNESCO is an organization that works for all member states at all levels of development. That means that the UNESCO strategy for Tibet, it's also a global strategy that guides the work of UNESCO for the coming years as it assists all member states in transforming their Tibet systems. The vision paper, and I looked at it yesterday, is a vision for the German government to guide or give some ideas for its development cooperation. But still, when I looked at the vision paper, I saw that there were some really striking commonalities that really bring them together. And the first point would be that there is a common vision of TVET as a catalyst for change. In the UNESCO strategy for TVET, that's expressed as by the fact that TVET is seen as something that contributes to building of skills for individuals. We saw this in the presentation by Boen Chakroun this morning. So it's skills for individuals to learn, work, and live. It's also a means for building the skills for societies, that they become more peaceful and inclusive, and finally to make economies more inclusive and sustainable. For this, skilled workers are a prerequisite, obviously, and we heard this through many of the contributions today. That also means that we have to transform the education system to insert green skills at all levels of education. It starts with pre-primary education, primary, secondary, tertiary, up to adult learning and education and lifelong learning. We have to find ways of greening existing occupations and also developing new occupations that respond to some of the needs for the future. So that was the first point, this vision of TVET as a catalyst for change. The second one would be that is a bit more elaborated in the vision paper than in the UNESCO strategy for TVET, but both point out that it is necessary to pay attention to both the formal and informal sector. We heard this again this morning. We saw some statistics from the ILO that show that globally about 60% of all workers are in informal employment. So of course we have to pay attention to the informal sector too. That means also that much of this employment is in low income countries. That means as we try to transform these economies to make them green, we have to find ways of that relatively low cost ways of transforming systems so that the societies and economies can become greener. It's also necessary, and I'm not sure that we talked about that much today, but we have to find ways of recognizing prior skills and competencies so that people who participated in informal learning have access to further formal education and to formal employment. And finally, the third point of convergence that I would mention is that there is a strong need for international cooperation to make sure that we achieve this just transition and the green transformation of the economy. And one way of doing that is like in this forum today, we all come together here from different countries, from different backgrounds, different institutions. We can share experiences, talk about lessons learned and best practices. And this is something that has to be done much more in the coming years. It means also including all stakeholders. You mentioned, for example, one colleague, you're on the stage now, you emphasized that it is important to also listen to the private sector. We need academia, government, international organizations, civil society. Everybody has to sit at the table to play their role. And then also, as we heard today, this is also very important to make sure that excluded and marginalized communities are included. BMZ, for example, promotes a feminist development policy, whereas for UNESCO also gender is something that is very much at the forefront, that is a priority for the organization that we have to include in all of our programs, including in TVET. So again, I think the 3 points of convergence that I see are TVET as a catalyst for change, importance of the formal and informal sector, and the need for international cooperation.
Thank you. I think some aspects were mentioned and discussed today, and thank you for wrapping up this, and bringing those things together, the vision paper and your strategy. Now you have a tough job, yeah? Thank you, the 5 of you. I know it is a tough job to wrap up and summarize an intense discussion and maybe in a big group in short time. You have this ugly clock here ticking. So I would ask you just to highlight what happened in your group, what were the main recommendations, messages that you want to share. And since in this energy group that was here, it was a quite big group. So you start with the first challenge. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we had the renewable energy group and TVET, and we had quite a diverse group from different continents. So a lot of information that I have to deliver in 1 minute, 57 seconds. So we discussed the challenges, and there were a number of challenges that the different countries are faced with. And some of the challenges were also highlighted. So I'll straight go to the solutions part. The biggest solution that we learned that there's no black and white solution. You cannot have one fit for all solution. So that needs to be seen as in each country context, how this can be done. It requires a lot of out-of-box thinking, a lot of political will on the part of the governments, how much they seriously put forward the agenda. There were also some examples shared where the investments in the energy sector were presented as more of a business case for the private sector, how the private sector can be involved in policy formulation, creating conducive environment, access to finance, and part of this training programs that involves skilling, upskilling. Also was discussion about how we can showcase the good examples, identifying new occupational profiles, and also develop those profiles. Social dialogue was also mentioned that needs to be strengthened. I think I'm done with 20 minutes, 20 seconds before.
Thank you very much. This is the benchmark. It's getting like a little contest here. So mobility, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, we had an interesting presentation. We didn't really have time for much discussion, but we heard some interesting information, starting with the urgency of looking at mobility when we're talking about the green transition, because our speaker from TUMI pointed out the rapid urbanization of the world and the incredible economic burden of things like being stuck in traffic. So we saw a lot of slides about, you know, the wasted time that people all around the world, I might say, global south and north, waste in traffic jams. And so we learned about the pressure on cities to accomplish many things at the same time. So they have rapidly growing populations. They're expected to be the epicenters of their economies while providing livable environments and opportunities for all, and get to net zero in the next 40 years. So a lot of pressure and a lack of capacity on the part of municipal, local authorities to deliver on those expectations. So we heard about some training that TUMI has offered, mostly for the global south in the transition. But I think the sense I had from the introductions in the group that everyone was there recognizing the challenges of sustainable mobility, whether we are in the global north or the south. We face many, many challenges, and I would agree with what was said by Mr. Hubler and others. Cooperation is essential. We really can't accomplish the goals if we don't work together. And I'm done.
Thank you. It's getting like a little competition. So next group, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So equally a lot of pressure on the construction sector being responsible for a large part of emissions. So we were also quite a diverse group in terms of different stakeholders. And first, just to sum up some barriers that the sector is facing. So one issue that was mentioned is the affordability of biomaterials, then lacking regulation in this context, lacking demand from the client side or customer side as well for those biomaterials in construction, limited availability of those materials, and then that sometimes concrete, for example, is still seen as modern and aesthetic for a lot of regions. So yeah, the urge to create or combine new and old. Then we focused some more time on solutions from the industry side. So one big point is raising awareness with clients and customers to integrate those green materials. Of course, industry and government should work closely together here to create more demand for circular economy as well, and also to start already in the tender stage of construction projects to integrate more environmental and social criteria. And yeah, always engage in a close stakeholder dialogue. Then improve the image of the industry, use sector councils as change agents to make it more attractive for graduates as well, and to use TVET schools, for example, as a lighthouse in terms of green buildings. And last point, to really bring the urgency and the pace into the conversation due to the urgency of climate change.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
So, well, green cities. Oh, sorry.
Go on.
I would say we focus our conversation mainly around 3 poles, which is one, what is going to be the job of the future in green cities? What are the skills that are required? And lastly, the role of TVET potentially. So basically, we started first with a presentation from CEDEFOP, from Stelina, and really she highlighted that according to their research, urban planners, managers, ECT specialists to boost citizens' engagement are going to be some of the key jobs for the smart and green cities of the future. I think something which was really interesting for all of us was mentioning empathy as a skill that really is going to be needed, and that we will need people that can teach about empathy. But from the groups, we also, we highlighted the role of educators, so teachers and trainers, politicians, in the sense that they also need to be aware of the consequences of their choice and to be a little bit educated about, greening. Also the importance of both social entrepreneurs and of, entrepreneurs with green skills, green knowledge, and that are also innovators in this sense. When it comes to skills, I really need to speed up. Okay, so we look at the transversal and technical skills as really key factors, but from the group discussion, it also came out that green literacy is key. And then I will just quickly move to the role of TVET. I think we got this beautiful image that TVET can both accompany change in the short period. So it means it can just respond to the immediate needs, but in the long term, it can trigger change. So yeah, I have to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Just please mute it. Yeah, great. Agri-foods.
Yeah,
thank you.
Last group, I'm trying that I can summarize everything, because we have talked about many different challenges and barriers actually we are facing when it comes to also transforming agri-food systems. We mentioned around accessibility, especially for smallholder farmers. We mentioned specific competencies and skills lacking. We mentioned the difference between modern and traditional knowledge and the needs on the ground, and also for the market and the market demands. And we had a really, really nice, also what I found nice last round, looking for solutions and comments. And here we gathered some tackling the challenges we have mentioned at the beginning. So for example, the accessibility and also the challenge to get especially young people involved in agriculture in the rural areas is really challenging, but incentives, this was our key word here, to give incentives and to make it more attractive to work in the agriculture. For example, also by acknowledging the role and the importance, which we agreed, food, we all need food, and we have also to put more political will on that. We had the point of, now I'm forgetting, we had the point of the linkage of TVET, and we called it also, someone said, agriculture TVET, ATVET, and what is missing here to become more green are the green skills and specific skills also to be more responsive to climate change, to be able to do that. We talked about new technologies also for low technical inputs which are needed to become more productive and more efficient in the agriculture. This just mentioning some of them. There are big challenges also for marginalized groups, for women, for land rights and land use. And I have 3 seconds, I stop here, but thank you so much to the group and all the insights we got.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think you deserve all a warm applause because this was an excellent job. It's always difficult to summarize. Well done. Thank you. Before I ask you for your reactions on that, is there a remark, a comment, or something that you want to add from your groups that must be said before we close? In 30 seconds, yes. Nobody takes the chance. So I will ask you. From what you've heard now, maybe for the closing, can you highlight 1, 2 aspects that were mentioned now from the rapporteurs that you think, okay, this catches my attention and maybe why?
Well, one thing is clear that we heard from all the rapporteurs and also throughout the day that there are a lot of challenges that we face as a society. But I think at the same time, there's also a lot of opportunity. There are solutions that can be found. We can look at the production chain, for example, and find ways of making individual steps greener, making them more sustainable. We can make use of new technology. I think there is a lot of reason for hope. And in the end, really, any small step counts. I mean, for example, Boen Shakroon talked this morning about the extreme of people, and people look at climate change, for example, that on the one hand, there are the climate deniers, on the other hand, the ones that say it's all doom and gloom, it's the end of the world. But I think, there are solutions that we can find to achieve the just transformation and a green transition. Then another thing that was mentioned by several of the speakers, that there is this emphasis on a skills gap and the need for skilled labor. And there is one thing that occurred to me as I was listening to this. We also heard this morning about this lack or perceived lack of attractiveness of TVET as an occupational choice that many youth or families prefer to send their children to university. But I think if you look at young people, they're very often motivated by issues related to environmental protection. And I think if we can show that through TVET, you can make important contributions to achieving a green transformation, that you can make productive contributions to society, and you can also make a good living while doing that. I think that would help raise the attractiveness of TVET and also then close some of the skills gap that exists. And the final point was, again, what came across in all the contributions now is, again, this need for working together, because it needs everyone at the table and everyone pulling in the same direction so that we can achieve the green transformation.
Thank you. So my last question, from your point of view, what is the way forward? So what can we do now?
Okay, well, that's a big question. But one way to do that is to take advantage of the convergence that I talked about earlier. For example, we have a UNESCO strategy, we have a vision by BMZ, but there are other organizations that all work on TVET and working towards green transformation. I believe that all of us working together, we can achieve this just transition. We heard in the, I think it was the colleague from a circular economy who talked about some of the gaps that exist, the knowledge gaps, the implementation gaps. We know what those gaps are, and we can find solutions to address these gaps, to close them. That's one way to go forward. And then one important step, I'm looking at this now from the perspective of UNEVOC, is that there are many activities that we are engaged in. There's our work on the circular economy. There's the project on bridging on innovation and learning in Tibet. There is the Tibet Leadership Program. And we are reaching a lot of people with that, but not enough. And we can scale up these activities, and this is something that UNEVOC plans to do in the next years. But to do that, we still also need partnerships. We are very happy to work with BMZ, with our partners at BMBF, GIZ, VIBB. And I think all of us together, we can achieve this, reach a culture of change that will lead us towards a just transition that we are talking about today. So I think there's a lot of optimism, and the fact that we are united here today proves that there is a reason for hope.
Thank you very much. So this is, I think it's a very nice message for closing. There's a lot of optimism, and if we work together, we can achieve it as well. Thank you. Thanks to you. Thanks to the rapporteurs. And with this, I think we can give a warm applause to you. Thank you. And I think it's also a great moment to say thank you to everybody who was involved here. You for the discussions, and it was a very intense half day, and we can see it because some of you mentioned, when we started today in the morning, and it was noon. So we can see that we have had a lot of input and discussions, but we hope you enjoyed it. You take away new ideas, new friends, new people to talk to, new impulses for your work. It's a good moment to say thank you to all our speakers, panelists, rapporteurs, hosts, and the organization team who has spent weeks preparing the event. Thanks for the colleagues moderating the chats, for setting up the whole organization, all that's happening behind the scenes. I think you also deserve a very big applause from us. Thank you.